I have written a number of essays, some of which I have posted online in video form or in written form. And I love doing that. I absolutely love doing that, and I find it tremendously valuable. And I find that people tend to connect to my ideas a little bit better when I just speak off the freaking dome. So do let me know what you prefer, because I'm sure that not everyone will fall into one camp. Anyway, last time I talked about how it's very common in all cults, in all cultic situations, for the leaders to essentially manipulate the meaning of language to influence people, to influence people's perceptions of themselves, other people, and the world. And the example that I brought up last time was that of responsibility. This time, I would love to talk about choice and freedom. So, this is the land of the free. Here we are, in it. What does it mean to be free? The sort of common myth in this culture is that you are more and more free the more choices you have. So, what is a choice? What does that mean? In sort of cult scholarship, there is this concept that is very useful called bounded choice. And bounded choice is, if I were to frame something as you can either do this or this, those are your choices. What are they? What do you choose? So I am setting the limitations arbitrarily of your ability to make that choice, but framing it as your free choice. Or a more extreme example, if I told you, listen, you can either do this thing or I'm going to cause you harm in some kind of way, to threaten you. It would also be a bounded choice. This idea of bounded choice is so important to understand in the modern day because, okay, so the metaphor that occurred to me to represent consumer society, to sort of simplify what's going on here conceptually, the metaphor that occurred to me is that of a buffet. An all-you-can-eat buffet, all you can eat if you can afford it, if you have a car to drive there, if you have free time. Yeah. So, imagine a world. Here's the world. It's just nature. It's just nature things going on for quite some time. And then a certain species, one of the extensions of nature, one of the manifestations of that beautiful, complex earth, and one of those manifestations of the planet somehow forgets that they come from the planet. They have this odd perception that they are in control. Not in relationship, in control. So, They build on the planet one building. They're like, we're going to create the society called buffet. It's going to be the greatest thing ever. And in buffet society, you have so many choices. You have so many choices. You can get chicken wings. You can get mac and cheese. You can get barbecue ribs. But not only that, you can get tacos. You can get chow mein. You can get sushi. You can get pad thai. You can get anything you can possibly imagine at the snap of a finger. Again, if you can pay for it. So, the thing about the buffet is that if we want there to be plenty of chicken wings and macaroni and cheese and lo mein and tacos, we need for people to produce those things, right? And people do produce those things because they love to, but that simply will not meet the demand of the buffet, this well-oiled machine, okay? So we've got to have people cooking, we got to have people mopping the floors, we got to have people we gotta have people growing the food, but we better keep those people out of sight, right? Because we don't actually want people to know. If people are going to pay the buffet for their food, the people better believe that the food is coming from where they're paying for. If they find out that it just comes from the ground and from the coordinated efforts of human beings, that's going to be a big problem for the buffet. So, we've got all kinds of people doing all kinds of jobs to keep this buffet running. And a few of the original folks who got the idea for this thing, a few of the original, well, that was these people's grandpas, right? It was their great-great-great-grandpa who founded Society Buffet, right? Those people whose great-great-great-grandpa founded the Buffet Society, those people, they are the owners of the infrastructure of the buffet. And they own everyone who works in the buffet. Much of their little cubby holes that they sleep in and keep their things and all this, their little lockers in the locker room, these are owned by the folks whose great-great-grandpa founded this place. Not all of them. There are, of course, some people who are quite affluent within the buffet, who merely who were quite good at playing the buffet game. And that's something to talk about in another video. Hard work and valuing that intrinsically and why that is very silly. Hard work over meaningful work. Hard work over work with whose effects we pay attention to. Okay, so within the buffet society, there's a small subset of people who have access to ostensibly every choice. They can have any choice they want. They can have gold-plated filet mignon, You know what I mean? And then they can go to the buffet doctor and get their, I have the hiccups, excuse me. They can go to the buffet doctor and get treated for the fact that they have ingested gold. There's a small number of people within the buffet society who have access to ostensibly everything, and they think they are very, 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 very free. Because they have so many choices. However, the vast majority of people who live within the buffet society, there's all these people working on the inside, right? There's people washing dishes, there's people mopping the floor, there's people taking people's orders, all of these kinds of things. Those people have a significantly smaller, they have significantly less access to all of these choices. But they are told that they could have access to all of these choices if they would only continue working hard, etc., etc., etc. They too could break free, they just haven't earned it. So that is profoundly problematic on a couple of levels. The first being that it is not true. We know that that almost no one goes from being someone who washes dishes in the buffet society to being someone who owns means of production, owns land, these kinds of things. That almost never happens, but that actually is a secondary problem to the bigger problem, which is that to succeed, to successfully take that journey from essentially being someone who goes from the lower class to the upper class, not only does that almost never happen, but to become a dominator, to become an owner, is not a desirable outcome at all. We are certainly propagandized to believe that it is. But literally, what becoming successful in the stereotypical sense where you get rewarded with money and power, becoming successful in the stereotypical sense requires that you code switch, that you abdicate your values, that you sacrifice yourself, that you leave people behind who you grew up with or who have surrounded you and supported you. It requires you to absolutely abandon your values. That's essentially, I could make a whole video on this. There are so many values in this culture that are espoused, which are literally soul denial. Are you willing to play this role despite who you are? That is the essential question that you have to answer if you want to be stereotypically successful. The same is not true for if you want to live a meaningful life and live well. You don't gotta sacrifice your values one bit for that, thankfully. So choice. The way that we are taught to think about choice as being I have agency because there are 80 brands of toothpaste and I get to pick which one I want. And the more choices, the better. Again, whereas I really believe that our freedom depends completely and totally on our recognition and dismantling of buffet society. I think that freedom is outside buffet society, right? And we are so contained within it, so many of us, that it is very difficult for us to imagine, to live out there in nature world. That sounds brutal. And nature can be tremendously brutal. It's certainly true. I also am not a Luddite. I'm not a prepper. I'm not a back to the lander per se. I essentially think that there are energetic dynamics, which are with, when I say nature, I mean the way, the Tao, what's been going on here on this planet and within the universe for a very, very, very long time. And I essentially perceive humans as, again, having forgotten, and we've begun to move in this kind of orthogonal way to nature rather than being with it. And so we find ourselves confronting existential risk, because when we make the mistake of thinking that we are in control, when really we are, it's like a leaf on a tree, thinking that it is controlling the tree. It's like, no, if the leaf thinks that, it has a disease, and the tree will be like, nah, dude, like, reintegrate into the soil, my man. Like, no, won't do. And so, buffet society is getting kicked as we speak. This is not a bunch of white people on Naked and Afraid surviving, right? So much of being with nature for human beings expresses itself as collectivism. And I don't mean top-down, corrupt government communism. I mean dialogical collectivism, where people are talking to each other and helping each other and recognizing each other and the earth as intrinsically sacred. Outside of the buffet society, we don't have as many choices. What if these fingers become like super buff from doing these videos? Then I'll make training videos, and that's going to be how I'm going to strike it rich. Anyway. Outside of buffet society, our choices are fewer, in a sense, by a quite toxic definition of choice. We don't get next day shipping. We might have to stop drinking coffee. I know. This is why I'm going to get canceled. I know it. But I want to suggest to you that what would be available to us despite our lack of coffee and control is the thing we are trying to get through all the coffee and all the control. Basically, what I want to suggest to you, TLDR, we have built a totally carceral situation for everyone, including the people who are successful at it, including the people who are rewarded with money and power, that all of us live in a totally carceral situation in buffet society. And that doesn't have to be this like pessimistic, like, oh, don't say that, it's gonna become true if you believe it. Paulo Freire says, and he's a lot smarter than me, I'll tell you that. Paulo Freire says that recognizing the reality of oppression, recognizing the reality of the situation that we find ourselves in, is the absolute baseline conditional first step for getting free. And I totally agree. If you wouldn't mind reading Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire, I would really appreciate it. Yes. The situation that we have created, trying to get free, is totally carceral and limiting. True freedom is going to be outside the walls and the safety of the buffet, in relationship with other people and with the earth. That is vulnerable. We do not have total control over what happens. And that is our chance at getting free. We will not be free within the walls of buffet culture. And again, what I don't mean is that we all need to be preppers or back to the landers or something like this. What I am saying is that we do have the potential to recognize this paradoxical situation that we're in, where we seek to be free in a certain way, and limit situations, mostly for marginalized people, and certainly for marginalized people, and certainly for the earth, and largely for everyone else. True freedom is not relevant to how many choices you have. True freedom has to do with no person being a means to someone else's end. That's what we ought to be looking for, in my opinion.